now the bangs are here, but they won't be there forever. So to start off our series of roundtables is joining us from her home in Brooklyn. Oh my God, that's two from Brooklyn. Imara Jones, creator of Translash Media, host of the podcast Translash Podcast, produced by our very own Futuro Studios. Hey Imara, what's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?
Hey, how are you all tonight?
Imara always looks so beautiful. You always really put us to shame, Imara.
No. Look at you. Look at you. You're like Boss Lady Red Lip and your top and
the
artwork all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And Julio has on a collar tonight, which is very dressed up for him.
It's like a big thing.
I don't.
But
even
I also
think,
have like. Yeah,
I don't think I've seen you in a collar. It tells you how big a night this is.
Listen, Ima, I just want to say one thing.
What's that?
All of your commentary about style and who's cute, please just continue to bring it. Please just continue to bring
Harris
it.
County. I saw the Harris County. I saw the guy from Harris County today on television, and I did the same thing. I was like, "Wow, Imara, he is cute." Like I was just like obsessed with it.
You
so,
metrosexual, you. So listen, keep it coming because Imara always brings surprises. We're so happy that you're joining.
And I have good
Brooklyn.
taste. I was right?
You were.
And I have good taste. So listen, joining us from Birmingham, Alabama. Yes, Birmingham, Alabama is R.L. Nave. You know him because he's been on our show before. He's the top editor of Reckon and co-host of the Reckon Interview podcast. What up, Ryan?
Yes, good to see you.
Ooh, Ryan looking all good too. Hello, Ryan.
We got him on mute.
Come here, get off mute.
This is happening. It's like this. It's
oh wait, he says he's on mute.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
All right, we'll get that
life.
fixed up. Yeah. All right,
it's live. It's live.
Wait,
this is what happens when you go live.
I muted myself.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
There you go. We hear you.
Yeah.
What's up, y'all?
Well, you shouldn't be muting yourself, Ryan. You have a lot to say.
You have to use your voice.
Yeah,
exactly. Use my vowels.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, sweetie. It's good to see you.
When was the last time we saw
screen?
Ryan? We saw Ryan in February. Was it
February?
February?
It was February of 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, that was this year.
Wow.
The night before we saw RL, we were dancing to the blues in Jackson, all of us going crazy. And then we did a show, and then we went out to eat some crazy stuff, more crazy stuff in Mississippi, Jackson. But it's so good to have you joining us from one of my favorite cities, Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah. Okay, so let's do a little bit of big picture, some framing. So I do want to quote somebody who is not often quoted on this show, but Dan Rather. Yes, you know who Dan Rather is. Okay. So Dan Rather, when I was on, I guess it was on MSNBC. Yes. And he said he was asking for public patience. And I kind of like that because, there is a good chance that we're not going to know who wins. That's an interesting term. Because we just won't be able to make the call in terms of the votes being counted. And because there's just the historic number of votes to be counted. So basically, there's a very good possibility that ain't shit going to be called on ITT tonight, unless I don't even know if I want to say these words, but unless
don't say anything.
Let's just say the word L and S, and it looks like this.
Don't even say it.
Okay,
like,
so that
it could be seen as a dance. It could be a dance if you think about it.
So if something like that were to happen, now Trump has made it pretty clear
I just
that
made up a dance.
Yes, he intends to declare victory regardless tonight. You've already seen that. But the truth is that elections aren't over until the votes are counted. And his weird thing about, I'm just going to talk to the lawyers, my lawyers. And I'm like, who, Rudy Giuliani? Okay. It's important to remember also, we've been here before. Those of us who are of a certain age remember that 20 years ago, we were covering the story of what happened with Gore versus W. Bush. So we've been here before. The country is not going to explode because we don't know who the decisive winner is tonight, potentially. So everybody, por eso, just kind of exhale. Remember, we've been here before. Okay. Now, this is unprecedented, absolutely, because we are, dealing with a kind of authoritarian president who is not hiding that. So And we don't hide how we feel about those things because it's for real for us. So the first thing we're going to do on this show while my bangs last is, Imara, give us an emotional temperature check. How you doing? What's kind of going on? We know you look fabulous, but what's kind of going on? How you feeling?
I'm super good today. I'm super relaxed today. I woke up feeling very, very zen, very relaxed. I've been in that space all day. I think I maybe glanced at cable news early, but I really don't believe it looking at cable news today until there's actual news. So I mostly, have been doing things like this throughout the day. And in between those, looking at HGTV. That's what
are you watching?
On HGTV, there is this program. It's Windy City, and it's a long story, but it's essentially about these business partners who renovate houses in Chicago. But I think the hidden story here is that I actually think that the woman's business partner, it's a woman and a man, and he essentially, I think, undermines her on every project. And I think that he's actually secretly a hater, and he secretly does things to make sure that they lose money. So that's what I think.
That's how Imara is handling her temperature check. Okay, that's why you chilled.
No, but honestly, I was totally chill today. I have to say I was a wreck yesterday, and I was a wreck probably leading up to this over the past week. But today I'm super, super honestly, like, I'm very good.
I'm feeling you. RL, what's your temperature check?
Yeah, it's interesting for journalists. I mean, this is the Super Bowl, right?
Dun, dun, dun.
Is that where you're like dribbling? Oh, okay, just kidding.
Dribbling.
Wow. Okay. Hey, we actually have a live audience. We actually have a live audience all over, like on Now This. We don't want to lose this sports vibe.
Was a joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try to stay away from
RL.
college football.
Yeah, continue. Right. But it is the Super Bowl. It does feel like the Super Bowl. Continue.
Right. And so at this point in the game, we're just monitoring what's going on. I reckon, we had folks out in the field. We have a reporter who's based in Tennessee. We sent a reporter to Georgia. We have reporters in Alabama. We sent a reporter to Mississippi just to kind of get a sense of what's going on in the region and take the temperature. I mean, you're seeing the same things you're seeing around the country. I mean, to a person, everybody you talk to has seen the longest line they've ever seen at their polling place.
Yeah.
Even in my itty bitty former polling location in rural Mississippi, in a volunteer fire station, my former roommate told me that there were 25 people in line this morning, which is crazy insane.
Wow.
And so, and you're reading that as, I am so enthusiastic, I'm making sure, as opposed to, well, this is what voter suppression looks like, or is it both?
I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, this is dope. I mean, like, obviously people are standing in those lines because like they feel like they have something to fight for. And people, people are fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their communities, and they're fighting for their futures. They're fighting to be heard. I got up to vote at 6 o'clock this morning, and we see elderly folks carrying their folding chairs because they know that they're gonna be hunkered down. Now, like, it shouldn't be that way, right? Like, we need to figure out a better solution. And the pandemic doesn't help, but I think that's, like, we can have both conversations. I mean, I think we can be inspired by what we're seeing. People who are coming out to vote for the first time. I mean, even the way that the campaigns are engaging first-time voters, new voters, is a sign of hope. But it's also a sign, to say, hey, like, this shit is not working the way it needs to work. Like, why do you have to register at all? Like, why is there a registration cutoff? Why are there all these arcane rules around absentee voting in different states, right? And so, like, that is what voter suppression looks like.
It's just like the
anything you do,
like Amara's ham-handedness comment that has stayed with me. That it's so obvious. There's so many examples, right, Ryan?
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. It's an argument that folks who support the Second Amendment say, which is like any little regulation you put between me and my right to buy a firearm infringes on that right. And so, like, why doesn't that same theory carry over to folks' right to vote, right? Like, why are we talking about deregulation when it comes to people voting? Why are we talking about less government when it comes to folks who are voting? But yeah, I mean, folks are showing up and showing out. I mean, we out here, in the South and all over the country. And so
we out here.
So it's interesting. So just so that people know, we're doing this live for 6 hours. People are coming in the live stream. There are some states that are going to be closing at the top of the hour. Yeah. And also looking at some of the screens right here, there is some vote, as I say, some vote coming in from Kentucky, but we'll try to our producers are going to try to update us, and we'll be sharing what we can, like at the top of the hour. So in the meantime, we want to talk a little bit about the South, right? Because it feels like it is a conversation, right? And actually, RL, on your podcast, Reckon, in the Reckon interview, you said that a lot of people seem to dismiss Southern politics, including people who live in the South, and that it's often looks as politics doesn't matter in the South. But then you said this year back in Jackson, Mississippi, pre-pandemic, when we were all together and hugging and and sharing meals, that the South has played an outside role in shaping every American institution. So I want to get the take on both on the South from both of you. So Imara, what you've also talked about this in the past in several in your appearances on the show. Let's unpack what the South really means now in this election cycle, because I feel like it still feels a little bit mysterious, but in fact,
how does the South feel mysterious?
I think
how does the South?
Well, no, I think from a political mainstream conversation, right, where it feels like still traditional and like this notion that the South is changing is almost, people are kind of discovering it.
The most intensive demographic
been talking about this
is happening in the South, and that's why it's mysterious in the sense that it's no longer just a black-white dynamic. Is that
right? Not only that, but also that that we shouldn't be surprised at what's happened this year. Because I looked at some exit polls, for example, out of Georgia before we joined on the show, and there was 60% positive opinion of Black Lives Matter, right? And in Georgia, you know what I mean? Like, there's this notion of racial reckoning is like, yes, that is something that we believe in. And so I think it's a little bit more complicated is what I'm saying, about the South. And I just want to get this notion of what you think, Imara, and then you, Ryan, about like your thoughts about the role of the South in this cycle.
Yeah. I guess a couple of things. Well, first of all, I grew up in Atlanta. For everyone who doesn't know,
that's why I asked you.
I have very, 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 very real Southern bona fides as well. I think a couple of things. I think one, voter suppression was perfected in the South. I think we have to remember that actually the basis for the South African apartheid constitution actually was the Alabama state segregation constitution, right? They based it on how do you figure out how to keep people who could tip the majority suppressed and out of power. And, South African whites were looking around the world, and the best example for them was in Alabama. The reason why I start in that place is that I think we have to remember that voter suppression has always kept the South since Reconstruction, since the end of Reconstruction, has always kept the South in this really weird place where it always should have been different electorally than it was. And actually in the South, when you had free and fair elections, essentially between, the end of the Civil War and in some cases up to the turn of the century, it looked politically progressive. It was a politically progressive place, and it was radically different. And so it's always been this weird space where if the politics actually were allowed to play out like the politics should have played out, that in some ways the South would look more like Minnesota than it does what we think of the South today,
Right.
And so within that mix, right, we've had all this demographic change in the South that has fed into that. But because of the traditional black-white dynamics, I mean, let's just be honest, all too many people who came from the South, either who came as migrant workers, one, were marginalized in the society. And when you're marginalized, you don't vote. It's just the way that it works. Or played into this larger dynamic that I was talking about, in which there was an interest in not aligning with Black voters, right? And it was seen as being, not a good thing to ally with Black voters. And then thirdly, when you had people who were progressive, who came from other parts of the country, moved to the suburbs, those people overall also started to vote Republican and in ways that didn't align with Black voters. And so I think what you're seeing now with the efforts of Stacey Abrams, with the way in which Donald Trump has clarified what the election is about, that the Southern politics are actually aligning with what the South should always have been. Right. And so you have more of an alliance between white women in the suburbs and Latino voters and Blacks. That type of coalition should have always been there. Before, it just would have been rural Southern poor whites, as it was, people who immigrated to the cities from the North after the Civil War, and Blacks. And that was the Progressive Coalition. And that held for almost 50 years. So what I'm saying is that the politics, I know it's a really long answer, but I just
this is exactly why we wanted to correct the both of you. I want
to correct the idea that the South, I think the way we've envisaged Southern politics is wrong. And it's been very much shaped by voter suppression and racism. And when you start to find ways to crack those things open, the politics goes to where it should be, which is where it is now.
That's why I turned the cable news on. That's exactly, you got to what I was struggling with in how it was being explained even today. That's why I should have just watched Windy City with you. Ryan, what about you? What in the role of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, a favorite pastime of Southerners, right, is clapping back at people who are not in or of the South, and sort of explaining what's really going on, or taking exception to some of the narratives and some of the misconceptions. But I mean, it is true that Southern politics is very complicated. One of the things that we've been reporting on this year is like how the South has had a role, not just in shaping movements, but I mean, even not just in shaping institutions, but it's in shaping movements. Every sort of, think of some of the most landmarks U.S. Supreme Court decisions, for example. You can argue about whether my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri is part of the South, but the Dred Scott decision. You think about the role Reconstruction played and Jim Crow, and what Southern states did in reaction to the presence of Black people in these states. We were talking to a professor at Emory, Fred Smith, on the podcast, I think that there's this narrative that, we think about things like integration. We think about sort of some of the landmark decisions that, at least ended Jim Crow from a legal standpoint, as things to celebrate in the South, which like those are cool things. Like we should talk about those. But the story of the South is also like very much a story of states trying to suppress Black votes, and like really keep Black folks in their place. Now, what I would also add to that conversation is, like there would be no Voting Rights Act if it was not for organizers in places like Mississippi and the Delta and the Black Belt and Alabama, right? And so, where the narrative gets twisted is the assumption that people make that like there is no history, there is no tradition of resistance, and that's just straight up false.
Or progressivism. I'm sorry. There's a long-standing history of progressive politics in the South, and the reason why you have voter suppression, right, and the deliberate attempt to keep white and Black voters separate from each other is people in power know that progressive politics is the natural alignment of Southerners.
So interestingly, if you look at the demographics, you both know that the South, not in my lifetime, but it's going to be Latino and African American majority. So the question there is that alliance now that needs to be worked on in terms of Latino and African American intersectionality, because there is something that I witnessed, which was that many Latinos also are, their kids are going to school with the children of, let's say, Trump supporters, and they want to be like their friends. What I'm saying is that there needs to be frontal work in the South about building those bridges. As somebody that is not from the South, but hold on, Imara, because we're going to take a turn like this, sort of, but also not, because of course there are many trans people from the South who live in the South. But I want to talk about something, Imara, that you said on a recent episode of the Translash podcast, which we love. You were speaking with the journalist Samantha Allen about people in red Republican states around the country, and you said her words should give all of us hope. Let's take a listen.
There's this amazing groundswell of change happening in this country that can't be stopped. It's people talking to their friends, their family members, their coworkers, people they go to church with. Once people get to know trans folks, it's hard for them to like close their hearts again. You can open somebody's heart and it's rare that someone's going to snap it back shut again. And I think what gives me optimism and hope specifically is when these anti-trans bills get proposed, when they come to the state legislature, what's happening is trans people themselves were telling our stories.
Yeah, so there are a significant number of LGBTQ folks who are running in this election. In this November general election, there are 574 LGBTQ candidates on the ballot, which is a 33% increase from 2018, according to a report from the LGBTQ Victory Fund. And I think I've told this to you before, Imara, but I do love to point out that Rose Arce and I, she was actually with NLGJA at that point, were the first ones to put national coverage of the first trans delegate to a DNC. Jane Fee actually is her name. So let's move to 2020 now, Imara. So what are you thinking in terms of trans people at the community in this election? Like what are the things that are frontal for you in terms of today?
Well, I think just the number of trans people that are running for office, I think it's a record this year. And so that's really hopeful. I mean, there are trans people running for Congress. It's likely Sarah McBride tonight, at the end of tonight, will become the first trans person elected to a state Senate position in the history of the United States and in Delaware. So I think that that's one thing. I think that the response to living 4 years for what for trans people is and has been an oppressive regime has meant that more in political involvement, which I think is really important and hopeful. And it's also something that Samantha was talking about in her book, Queer and Red America. She's trans herself and she's traveled all across the country. She went to graduate school and got her PhD in Atlanta as well. And so this reality that we were talking about before, which is that the South is a place of oppression, red states are a place of oppression, and also a place of resistance, right? And you have some of the most interesting and innovative organizations with respect to the trans community in the South.
Right.
Really? Especially in Atlanta, but it's not only in Atlanta. North Carolina, there's some really important groups, the rest of it. So I think that's it's among the most dynamic. And so all of those things are really front in mind. And I think the third point that I would make that's on my mind is just how much is at stake for trans people, not only at the federal level with this administration and everything that they've done to say that trans people don't have equal rights in both policy and rhetoric, and now with their Supreme Court choice, but also in state legislatures. So next year there will be pending anti-trans legislation in 23 states, almost half the states in the country. And the outcome of those state legislatures tonight, and many of those places will have a big impact. And so I'm thinking about just how much is at stake tonight, the innovation of trans resistance, and just how many trans people are running for office.
Yeah. So just as we get up to the top of the hour, there are several polls. There's split times closing, but the 6 states that are going to be closed fully at 7 are Georgia, Indiana, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia are the first. And I think we're getting some early results from Kentucky and Indiana because some of them closed like a half hour ago. So the Twitter thing's already happening. We're talking to producers. We're going to try to see what some of the outlets, supposedly the Associated Press, are saying. But just want to let you know
about Kentucky.
Kentucky, which right now, early returns, I mean, there's about 14% of the vote. And
so that's super early.
There's a county, super early. There's a county that, and I just saw it as well as we were looking at, there's a county that Trump won that he's not winning right now. So we'll see.
It's weird, though, because the AP is prepared.
Patience.
It's weird. So we're asking for patience because I'm not quite sure how you call something with such a small percentage, but that's why we're here. To
I think Reuters said something. I think one of the things that's important about what we're doing with the show tonight, and to frame what Maria says, is that we're not gonna, we're relying on the Associated Press on and just other sources. We're not going to get into let's call a state because someone called it. But we do know that we're about a couple minutes away from 6 of the state polls closing. So how's that, man? I felt very news angry.
We can also
criticize
our fellow journalists if we feel like
Reuters really jumped out of that. I mean, I'd come on, let's
a little much.
Kentucky's
take it away, Julio.
Remember what happened in 2000 with like three networks calling CBS, ABC, and NBC, and the AP kept calling and uncalling Florida several times throughout the night.
It started with CBS. I actually did the story. I was at CNN, and the next day we went to CBS to do the story about what happened. Because I know. And we were interviewing our friends. Anyway,
so let's see. Before the polls close, so we've asked our In the Thick community to sort of, or many of you are watching us right now. Hello, everybody, who've listened to us each week, for the past 4 years. I mean, or we're going to go into 5 pretty soon. So we heard from a lot of you in the lead up. So we just want to play a message from one of our listeners on how they're finding hope right now. And this is Ace from Knoxville, Tennessee. So let's listen.
Hi, my name is Ace, and I'm 31 years old, and I'm living in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm actually feeling hopeful because the Trump administration has essentially removed the mask that many of our current political leaders have hidden behind, pretty much their entire political careers. But we now see them for who they are. Their active or even quiet support for the horrendous policies and practices is now out in the open. And we, the rising generations, will not allow that. We're responding by voting in strong, compassionate, and humanistic leaders into office. It's darkest right before sunrise, and I think I can start to see the sun coming up. Thanks for all you do, and looking forward to the future of our country.
Okay, Ace from Knoxville, Tennessee. Is my new. I have plenty of listeners. Whoa, wow! Thank you, Ace. Ryan, don't want to force you with an answer. We might be getting some results in a couple of minutes, but I do want to ask.
Okay.
What Ace said. How do you think the Trump administration has changed political engagement, and not just limited to voting, but sort of this elevation of civic duty with a capital C and a capital D? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I'm not a poll watcher or a horse race guy. But, I look at somebody like Jamie Harris in South Carolina and the race that he's running against Lindsey Graham. And, people can analyze their positions all day long. But, an African-American Democratic candidate in a state like South Carolina does not run that kind of race, does not run that close to, a veteran senator, an incumbent, who is close to the president, without inspiring, people who are not just, the folks that you would think of who are a natural part of a Democratic base in South Carolina, right? I mean, like obviously, like young white folks are getting out there. He's building a coalition of older white folks. I mean, going back to the conversation that we had earlier about how the South is changing, I think Black folks and folks of color are doing what they've always done in the South. What is starting to change is that, slowly, just enough white people are also realizing, and I don't know, I mean, a lot of people frame it in terms of, people, voting their interests or whatever. But, I think a lot of, white folks in our southern states, which are, experience the highest rates of poverty and the highest rates of unhealthiness, are also saying that, like, this is not working for me, right? Like what we have done, like it is not working. Like whatever my views, about others are, right? So like maybe I need to give this guy a second look. And so I also think of Senate races in like the Senate race in Mississippi that is closed. It was closed 2 years ago. I mean, it would have been inconceivable 5 years ago to think that like any national money would go into Mississippi to help a Democratic candidate. Same is true in South Carolina. The same was true in Georgia probably 10, 15 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. But like even that conventional thinking is starting to turn on its head because, whatever this coalition is, whoever is a part of it, I think is making people wake up and realize that like it is possible for Mississippi to be a different place. It's possible to have a different kind of Georgia. I mean, aside from the 2 Senate races that we're watching, people are also watching the Georgia State House. And that's something that gets left out of the conversation because next year these state houses are going to be in charge of redistricting and redrawing maps.
Well, we just want to make it clear we are talking about the South in a very deep way, and that's how we're starting our 6-hour-long election coverage. That's live, by the way, live 6 hours from our homes. Okay, Imara, you tweeted recently, and I'm right here with you. This was your tweet. You basically said, if we even have to ask if violence is a possibility in the aftermath of this election in this country, that the question itself is alarming and that we should already be not accepting that it's a normal thing. But we honestly know that violence has been targeted towards communities of color, towards immigrants, towards the queer community, towards the Muslim community, and that the violence really egged on by the words of the Trump administration and the Trump himself is real, that the pandemic has disproportionately affected communities of color, all things that we know of. And the fact that there has been this white supremacist backlash, we have witnessed it as a result of the protests from the Black Lives Matter protests. So Imara, anything can happen in the next 24 hours or so. What are you expecting in the aftermath? And I have to say, yesterday I made a quick beeline to 125th Street right here in the heart of Harlem. I didn't see, the only thing I saw boarded up was Rainbow, which closed. Rainbow closed.
So listen, Maria, before you talk about,
Harlem,
we just want to share what at least we're looking at NBC News and everything's pretty much.
I'm getting an interruption. Okay, we have breaking news from Julio Ricardo Varela.
We got
Julio, take it away.
The 6 states, and I'm watching broadcasts, but of the 6 states that closed, the only one that has actually been projected to be won by Trump is Indiana. All the other states, Georgia, Kentucky, Vermont, Virginia, and South Carolina, are all listed as too early to make a projection. So before we go to question 4, wanted to just inform our audience. So
Indiana, thank you for that, George. Mike Pence. I don't know what.
I know. What am I saying?
What am I saying? So Imara, so what?
And also one more thing. The Associated Press has projected that Donald Trump will win Kentucky.
Okay.
So
all right.
So Kentucky and Indiana are in the Trump column.
Okay, Imara, what are you feeling? What are you thinking in terms of the next several days, hours?
Yeah. I am. My gut is that, well, first of all, I was surprised that not many things happened today. I thought there were going to be more incidents of voter intimidation today.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that none of those came to fruition. Trump had a website called Trump's Army where he was encouraging people to sign up to enlist. That was the language, as poll workers. So I am glad that that none of that panned out. I think that we really have to keep an eye on what happens tonight. My thinking is that the Oath Keepers and some of these other militia groups, Proud Boys, are very much animated and activated by this election. We saw the plot to not only kidnap but to kill the governor of Michigan and also the governor of Virginia, which, I don't know why that part of the story has gotten lost. And that to me was a symbol from the authorities that they were trying to shake these groups to not know whether or not they had been infiltrated and thus less likely to carry out these particular acts. My instinct has always been that if Trump loses tonight, that they will be in shock for a couple of days and that we would be in for a rough weekend. That's been my gut. And I think that it depends also on what Trump does. If they will be looking for him to signal what the next steps are. And if he comes out of a shock and goes into rage over the weekend and says, this was stolen, go do your thing. I think what we can look forward to, and I mean that in the worst way, I don't think mass acts of violence on the part of Trump supporters, but I would look for acts of terrorism and domestic terrorism that would shake us all very, very much.
Okay.
That's my honest take without a filter.
RL, do you want to what your what is Birmingham looking and feeling like?
I mean, I don't want to tempt fate, and I don't, want to be dismissive of the threat of violence or incidents. I mean, like if we do see things like that, I mean, like they're not coming to downtown Birmingham. Like they're not coming to the West Side. Like they're not gonna be in South Jackson, right? I mean, I wonder about some of the outlying areas. I mean, you have suburbs of some of these large southern cities, that are fairly racially diverse, and folks of color do not have the kind of numbers that are going to intimidate a militia. And so my view is kind of like my view of the pandemic. Like we don't know anything. Like we don't know how this thing is going to play out. I don't think it's ridiculous that people are going to the store and like stocking up for a few weeks and grabbing an extra thing of TP and just hanging out until we get a better sense of what this all looks like. And I mean, I think that's where a lot of folks in Birmingham are, right? In cities like Birmingham,
right. But I have to say though that like one of the reasons why my concern is elevated is I don't know if you guys saw what happened in a Black neighborhood in Fort Worth over the weekend, where a Trump train came in with a police escort. They were escorted into a Black community by the police. Wow. And spontaneously
that was some weird thing right there.
And Black people spontaneously came out of their homes and blocked the caravan and forced them to turn around and go back. Right. So I think that like things like that make me have a heightened sense that things that wouldn't normally be possible this year are possible.
There was you saw that video also of a military tank that was escorting a group of Trump cars, and it was a military tank. So it's not like you have one of those parked in your, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's not like you can just order one off of Amazon.
Amazon.com.
Neiman
so
Marcus.
Was there time-day discount?
Wait, let me.
Speaking of Neiman
We have
Marcus,
breaking news. We have breaking news, and throwing it now to Julio.
Speaking of Neiman Marcus, I don't know how I'm going to make that transition, but the Associated Press has projected Vermont for Joe Biden. So no surprises so far. No surprises so far.
Okay.
Shocking Vermont. All right. So Vermont did not go to Trump. So there you go. New England.
But Vermont went,
no, but I do think
it went to Trump last time. No. Correct. Just making sure.
Indiana did go for Obama in 2008.
Yeah, but exactly.
Purple Indiana.
Purple Indiana. So this question, that question I have for the both of you guys, because this notion of violence and, we see these reports of political supporters who seem to kind of, we're here, when you see maybe law enforcement around them, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Yes, you support the president. Where is that normalization? Do you guys think there's a normalization of that as well? RL, about sort of those supporters who seem to be like, people open carry, doing what they need to do, but you never see them get arrested, or am I missing that? What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, like I've seen people walk down the street in Jackson with assault rifles, and just like we would not.
But you mean like thrown over their arm, like thrown over as
casually,
as
like
an
a
accessory?
backpack?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. For all I know, somebody who just decided, like, let me see if I can walk down the street with a rifle on. But I mean, it's like Black folks wouldn't we would not dare. And folks who are that cavalier, I didn't see a lot of guns when I went to vote today. But yeah, I mean, these guys who show up, completely outfitted with the military gear and the guns, like they know ain't nothing gonna happen to them, and then, like we saw with the Kyle Rittenhouse guy. I mean, like,
the
like
teenager,
that
the 17-year-old.
Like that affirms to people like that, like I can pretty much do whatever the hell I want. Like this is my country, which, for a lot of them is like the thing that they are most terrified of. Right. Like losing the ability to like be able to walk down the street and do whatever the hell they want.
By the way, did you all if you don't follow her on Instagram, Feminista Jones, today she posted a picture of herself with her badass fabulous hair in Philly with several machine guns. Was it machine guns? And she's just like, that's me. And I'm just like, okay, that's not me. But I was like, check it out. A Black woman with a shit ton of weapons saying like, okay, you want your right? Here's my right. I love this stuff. And I'm like, all right. So do we have some questions?
We can ask them while we ask some questions. So if you're watching on stream, ask some questions. We'll post them up there. But a couple of things I just want to share that have been coming in.
More breaking news.
I'm not trying to ignore people. It's just that I can't get the information that we're getting, and I'm getting it through my phone. Okay. But so for people that are interested in where do communities of color, where have they been voting, or they say that they voted, there's a massive election eve poll that's being organized by several groups, in the Black community, Latino community, Native community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community, and they're going to be releasing them as each of the polls close. So I think I tweeted out, it's electionevepoll.com. But in the meantime, we're also getting updates from them. And I just want to share these breakdowns of Latino voters in Georgia, if people are interested, for Trump or Biden. And according to this poll that was done on election eve, so basically who you're voting for, according to everyone, 69% of Latinos in Georgia chose Biden, and 28% chose Trump. And people, and that's pretty much the same breakdown. Independents were a little bit smaller at 65 to 26 for Trump. Women were at 70%. Young people were at 70-40. So basically, in Georgia, which there's also this other tweet. More Latinos have already voted in Georgia, early voting, than they did in all of 2016. Georgia has a significant Latino population, and it is becoming a state where people are starting to do work. I think about Mi Gente, that has been working with Stacey Abrams. So I just wanted to share some of that. And we're going to, throughout the night, when we get more of that, we will...
we really needed to come up with a little jingle to just say, because people don't even know why. They don't understand why I'm doing that. It's because back in the day,
you just be like, oh, yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know, the jingle from the AP Wire. Okay, so we do have a question from Albert Garcia. Hey, Albert. Hey, Albert, what up? Thank you for watching. Love you, Albert. So he says, as journalists and media followers, do you see the threat of violence and the violence narrative being responsibly covered, i.e., will they fall into the, oh my God, folks of color are wilding out? Really good question. Imara?
Yeah, great question.
Well, first, I just wanted to say that if, that exit poll is right, that's really not good news for Trump, because Latinos are clustered in some of the most important counties in Georgia that will determine his fate. So we'll see. Yeah, like in Gwinnett County.
I mean, those are pretty high numbers
for him at all.
But
so to answer Albert's question, it's interesting because I think that most of what I have seen, I could be wrong, but what I've mostly seen has been a conversation about like Proud Boys and these others, and these other mostly white groups that could be the origins of violence. I haven't really seen much about Black Lives Matter, or, and Black Lives Matter in quotes, because Black Lives Matter, it's not even, it's not behind any of the violence, but or anyone associated just as a person of color. I haven't really seen much being done on that. It's mostly been focusing on Proud Boys and these others, which I do think is the origin of the threat. I mean, they're the ones who are thinking about kidnapping chief executives of states and executing them in the woods. So I think that that's it. I mean, has been a fear of violence, and some places have been boarded up, but I think most of it has been covered responsibly and has focused on what the threat really is, according to the FBI.
Although, are any of us watching Fox News these days? Okay.
No, but I will later tonight. It'll be my, I don't know, like my kink.
Okay, then it works. then it works, Imara. I was like, that's gonna be my kink. Okay. So how about you, RL? Do you think, or what's your perception how it's being covered in the South, for example?
I agree with that assessment. I mean, the one thing that does irritate me is how the mainstream media refers to a lot of these groups as like militias. The Proud Boys, they're the QAnon folks. But like, imagine if these were folks of color. Imagine if they were brown. Imagine if they were Arab. Right? Yeah. Like, they would straight up be terrorists. They would be trans terrorists.
That's right.
Right? But like, they get to be like, they get to use their like preferred organizational names as if there's some sort of like nobility to the fact that like they're semi-organized.
Yep.
And so like, that's disappointing. And then I think the other thing that we're missing is, I think there is a narrative of a scenario if Biden loses the election, like, will you see cities, for example, break out in uprisings? But I think the key difference there is, I think if that happens, like, it will be because like folks feel like the election was stolen, that voter suppression was rampant, that the votes that should have been counted were not counted, and that those will be a reaction to those things, not just sour grapes over losing the election. I do think that there is some sort of there's a sense of sort of false balance or false equivalency in the two narratives.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I love this question. This is
can
I
go
question.
Ding ding
Okay,
ding ding? Can I do ding 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 ding? I was gonna go ding 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 ding.
No,
ding,
I
ding,
have
ding.
to do it. Ding 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 ding
Okay.
ding 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 ding. Breaking news. Take it over, Julio.
We're just I'm getting a couple of texts and looking at some Florida numbers that have already started to come in. And one thing that if people who follow Southern Florida probably about 85% of the vote is in Miami-Dade, and Biden's lead is smaller than Clinton's lead in 2016. So
not good news.
We're going to be talking this notion that Donald Trump, one of the things that we did at, you just did at Latino USA, Maria, and other places, the Trump campaign spent a lot of money in Southern Florida with Cuban American, Venezuelan American conservatives, and they've been spending money since 2016.
That's
and
right.
I just want to take a moment, because I probably won't be able to say this anywhere else, because when people, let's talk about this is a perfect example of, if you're going to try to win those voters, and if you're establishing an investment and you go long term, as ridiculous as it might seem, whether it's communism or Cuba or Castro, if they're getting inundated, right, Imara, you've been in the politics game. I mean, that was one of the biggest places that the Trump campaign was. They were going to put their stake in the sand. We'll see what happens with Florida, but right now, all indications, at least from what we're seeing from about 85% of the vote in Miami-Dade, it's about a 10-point margin. And I believe in 2016, Hillary Clinton won it by 25%, and it still wasn't enough. So I'm trying to share what I can to frame this a little bit, and I just thought that was important to share now.
Look,
because
Julio,
it was coming in, Maria.
It is important what you're saying, which is that the Trump administration and then the Trump campaign really put their eye on Latina voters in Florida. I don't like to make predictions. I actually think that Trump is going to win Florida, and it's going to be because of Latinos and Latinas. But that's where I'm going to stop. Okay, so the question from Lara
go ahead, go ask the question.
Is
great question coming up.
What is your hope thermometer? Ooh, we like that. We need to do that. What is your hope thermometer for POC folks should Trump or Biden win? Basically, what will our world look like post-inauguration after each scenario? I'll just tell you that in terms of my feeling is that the 4 more years of Trump is just like such a dark cloud of suffering, human suffering, that's just like a wall of suffering. When I think of Biden, I think of, but we're going to have to work twice as hard. And many people will drop off and be like, oh my God, everything is fabulous now. We can go back and go do brunch. And the rest of us will be holding him accountable, holding him accountable. That's just me. I don't know, Julio, do you want to go, or should we have RL or
hope thermometer? No, I'd love to hear what our guests say about the hope thermometer. While I'm getting other information while I listen to this, I want to hear what they say about their hope.
Okay, RL, your
thermometer.
Hope thermometer.
Go ahead, RL.
Yeah, I mean, I think under the scenario that President Trump wins another term, I mean, we've seen the last 4 years. I mean, I think it'll be more of the same, but I also think that in some ways he and his administration and his followers will feel emboldened, given everything that has been stacked up against them this year with the pandemic, that if they're still able to squeeze this out, I think that they will see it as, no matter how big the margin is or how small the margin is, as a mandate. Now, I mean, there are variables. We don't know what's going to happen with the Senate. I mean, the Senate could flip, and we could have a scenario where President Trump has another 4 years, but we have a Democratic Congress, and what does that look like? And I think that there's still question marks about a Biden presidency. I mean, I think a lot of folks of color, particularly folks who are in the progressive movement, would breathe a bit of a sigh of relief. But we don't know what a Biden Justice Department looks like yet. We don't know what a Biden HHS looks like,
or
yet.
ICE or DHS or ICE or Border Patrol.
Ideally, Biden is actually getting rid of the Department of Homeland Security, getting rid of ICE. I mean, seriously, organizations that were created post 9/11, they did not exist before. They do not have to continue to exist. But I'm sorry, that's just maybe forward thinking.
But in terms of the hope thermometer, I'll just add, but then we have to look to the states. I mean, what is going to happen in state legislatures? This idea that, if you're a progressive, if Biden becomes the next president, that it's going to be all, crimson and clover. we know that there is often a direct reaction in states to whatever goes on nationally. And, you can certainly see a scenario under a Biden presidency, where state legislatures become, more Republican, more red, and some of the tactics that we've talked about on the show will just become, more entrenched, or folks will dream up things that we hadn't even thought of.
True. Because you know what? We weren't doing Instagram Live 4 or 5 years ago. I'm just saying we weren't doing.
No, that's true, and it's like there's still hope, and I think whatever comes out of this, the genie's already out of the bottle. Did I use the right metaphor? I'm sorry.
Yes,
my ESL
and
problem.
it's all ham-handed, and it's straight up. It's like our guy from Knoxville.
The bottle's open.
Ace from Knoxville called it. He's like, we've all seen it. So Imara, amor mío, to hope el termómetro de esperanza, or if we were to say it in Portuguese, it would say termómetro de esperanza.
Termómetro de esperanza.
G esperanza.
G esperanza.
G esperanza.
Well, I think, first of all, I'm just extremely hopeful at the number of people that have gotten involved and who realize the stakes of this election. And we're talking about people from suburbs, from in everywhere, every part of this country. So that's good news. And I think is good news regardless of what happens, even though if he wins, my hope thermometer is really low. I think we're going to go through the darkest of dark periods. And I think the very existence of the country will come into question. I really do. Beginning in the short term and unraveling as things move forward. I think if Biden wins, I think my hope thermometer is high, but remember the bar is so low. But I think my hope thermometer is high. And why is that? Because there's some real structural changes that could be in the offing. I mean, Biden has promised to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is going to totally remake the possibility for voting in the South and would have dramatic impact on outcomes just 2 years from now, when lots of governors and other state houses are up in the South. He's going to pass the Equality Act, or has said that, which would give trans people equality in the law within the first 100, both of these in the first 100 days, for example. So I think there's a lot more hope. And, as someone said, I'm not necessarily voting for my first choice. I'm voting for a better opponent. And so even if you don't get the best outcome in terms of everything that you want, what we do know is that we would have someone who's actually a Democrat in the office. And I mean small d Democrat, meaning that they understand the voice of the people. And those people you can pressure and move. Those people you can get them to do things that they don't want to do by keeping up the pressure. And I think a lot of progressive groups have learned an important lesson from the Obama years, which is just because someone speaks your language doesn't mean that you automatically surrender and stop organizing, that you have to get them to do what you want them to do. So I think that if Biden wins, I have a lot of hope. Although I have to say, overall, I do believe that the country is in for a very rough 2021, at least in the first 6 months, regardless of who wins.
Because 2020 has been such a breeze. Holy
I know, it's
Christ.
It has
I'm
been.
like,
it's the easiest of years.
Por favor,
it's been the easiest of years. It's like 1999 all over.
Oh my God, listen to you. Oh my God. So
it's literally like 1999. Like, we're getting amazing R&B and hip hop. Everyone has a job. Incomes are rising. Like, it's that time.
I love it. Okay.
And the thing that we have to worry about is Chupacabra and Y2K. Remember those are the things that remember, like in the night in like 1999, everyone was obsessed with Chupacabra and they thought it was a real thing.
Yeah.
It was a real thing.
But then we had Ricky Martin like doing we had Ricky Martin also living La Vida Loca. But anyway.
Oh my God.
So listen, Imara Jones, creator of Translash Media, host of the Translash podcast, RL Nave, top editor at Reckon and co-host of the Reckon Interview podcast. Our family, seriously, you are ITT All-Stars. You are ITT family. Thank you so much for joining us on our opening section of our coverage of election night 2020. It's been great to have you with Julio and me tonight.
Thanks
for having us.
So great to have you guys. So don't go anywhere because we're gonna have some Yeah, we're gonna have some other kick-ass all-stars with us in our next segment. So stay tuned, guys.